When we're young, we have an amazing, positive outlook about how great life is going to be, but somewhere along the line, we forget to dream and end up settling. Join Up Dots features amazing people who refuse to give up and chose to go after their dreams. This is your blueprint for greatness. So here's your host, live from the back of his garden in the UK, David Ralph.
Yes, hello there, everybody out there in internet land. This is a big show for us today. Now, you may not realise this, but yes, this is the half century. This is episode 50. We have got there. So thank you very much. Thank you. So I can't believe it. I really can't believe it that we have got to episode 50 already, but we have. So I had to choose a guest who was going to have the gravitas, who's going to have the charisma, the style, the charm, whatever, to make it a good one. And I think I've found the man. So today's guest is a man who was actually introduced to me by Tom Trush, who appeared on episode 17 of the show. And he said to me afterwards, he said, David, you have to have this guy on. He has an amazing story. Now, I think that was selling it a bit short when you realise that this guy started his first business at the age of, go on, try and guess, 4, when he sold artwork to his neighbours. Now, that certainly needs discussing. His business ventures have ranged from establishing a bathroom toll booth at his parents' home to creating an angel-financed pet health insurance company to a multi-million-dollar real estate development company, and many others. It seems like he can touch anything and it turns to gold. Today, his advice has appeared in media throughout the world, including Fox Business, Forbes and Business Insider. Plus, he has spoken to both domestic and international audiences. He was selected as one of the American Genius Beat top 50 influencers on occasion. His kids even take his advice. But hang on a bit, how about the fact that as a child he was diagnosed as having one of the worst cases of ADHD, along with sort of other learning disabilities too. The doctor had ever seen, or had never seen really, anything quite like it. Yet our guest refused medication and alternative education and taught himself how to succeed amidst those challenges. He's also a 3 times wrestling state champion, and we could go on and on and on. So where to start is the problem. So let's just get on with introducing you to a man who I'm so pleased agreed to join up the dots of his life, Mr. Charles Gaudet. How are you, sir?
I am doing absolutely fantastic, and thank you for the wonderful introduction.
That you're absolutely welcome. You have got so many areas of the life that I want to jump into straight away. But before we start, whereabouts are you living? Whereabouts is home for you? And I promise that we're not all going to come round and sort of knock on your door for a cup of tea. But
yeah, sure. It's in Portsmouth, New Hampshire.
So you're up near, I'm trying to get my bearings, that's where sort of Plymouth and all those areas is it?
I'm an hour north of Boston, right on the ocean.
So it's the perfect whale watching.
Well, I guess, sure, absolutely.
I had a very nice day outside Martha's Vineyard once, and we went whale watching out of Boston, and I've never seen whales so close. I thought I might see the occasional spurt, but they were literally jumping around the boat. It was absolutely amazing. You must look out your bedroom window and see whales just kind of swimming past. Please tell me that's true, Charles.
Well, not quite, but I will tell you that there was a time about longer than 5 years ago, maybe a decade ago, where we were out on the boat, and we were quite a distance from shore, and a whale came up from underneath our boat and hit us. And we ended up sliding off the whale's back into the water.
And what was it, a humpback?
It was a humpback whale, yep.
So it is amazing, really, isn't it? And, I'm not going to spend all my time talking about whales and dolphins and all that kind of stuff. But it is amazing that you have got all that on your doorstep. Because I live in the United Kingdom, and if I go down to my local beach, we probably will see a syringe. I suppose that's it. And you have got whales. That must blow your mind.
Well, whales are quite a distance off the shore. You're not going to see them from the land, but you'll see them by boat off the shore. We've got other cool things here. We've got a great little community. We've got the Pease Air Force Base, so we get to see all the different Air Force planes coming in. We've got a nuclear submarine station just over the bridge, so we get to see a lot of that type of activity. Air Force One will come in on occasion, so in addition to the ocean and the beautiful community and wonderful people here, it's a little paradise. It's a secret, though. Don't tell anybody.
I won't tell a soul. And you're lucky because no one listens. No, that's not true.
There you go.
That's not true. We're speaking to millions. So if we go back in time, which is the theme of the show, I suppose, joining up the dots. Where was life for little Charles? Where was sort of your starting area in America?
I think a psychologist would have a field day with me as far as when I got started. As you mentioned in the introduction, I started my first business when I was 4 years old. And the reason why the psychologist would have a field day is because all growing up, I really didn't know my father until the 3rd grade. My parents were together and they're still together now. But my dad, also being an entrepreneur, would get up in the morning before I would get up for school or just get up in life general because I wasn't quite in school then. So he'd get up in the morning before I got out of bed, and he would come back home after work after I was already sleeping. And he repeated this cycle day after day, 7 days a week. So I rarely saw my dad. And when I did see him, he would come home and say certain things like, "Hey kid, if you ever want to make it big, you got to start your own business. If you ever want to do something, you got to be an entrepreneur." And so I kept hearing that over and over and over again. And when he had bad days and he came home early, he'd say, "Hey kid, I want you to remember one thing. Employees suck. Don't ever be an employee." And so this was sort of the mantra that when I connected with my dad, I kept hearing this stuff about, if you ever want to make something, you want to start your own business and you want to be an entrepreneur. So I guess you could argue that I was looking for my dad's affection as a kid. I think we all are all through life. So I started my first business at 4 years old, selling artwork to my neighbors. So there was a lot of lessons.
But how did you do that? Sorry to jump in, but how did you do that? At the age of 4, how are you going round to your neighbors' houses?
Well, my brother and I sat on the front stoop of our house, and we had a little TV table in front of us, and we just drew artwork at the time as fast as we could so we could have as much product as possible. And then we just walked over to the neighbors' houses, knocked on their door, and said, "Hey, we drew this artwork. Would you like to buy it?" It's 25 cents, I think we were charging at the time, 25 or 50 cents. And so the neighbors initially looked at our products, and it just, whatever money we asked, they just gave it. Because to them, 25, 50 cents really didn't matter. Whatever we asked for, they just handed it over. Then there was this one woman that we went to her house. Her name is Mrs. Hersey. And I still remember this. I mean, it was shocking to me because it's the first time I ever had any sort of rejection in a business sense. And she looked at me and she looked at my artwork and she said, "Do you mean to tell me that this really is your best work?" And I looked at her and I answered honestly and I said, "No, not really." And she said, "So you mean to tell me you want me to spend 25 cents on something that is not your best work?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I guess." And she said, "Well, to me, I think it's only worth maybe 1 or 2 pennies. Would you sell it to me for 1 or 2 pennies?" And so I did. I sold it for 1 or 2 pennies. But the lesson in that was really my first lesson in the whole idea of business is not just to put something out to market. It really is that idea of creating a greater advantage, a greater benefit to somebody to help them get them closer, whatever their ultimate result is. I think we've lost a lot of that in business, and I'm going on a little bit of a segue, but I think we've lost a lot of that in business. We have business schools and colleges and books and gurus and whatnot. They teach this idea that the purpose of a business is to make a profit or to increase shareholder value. And where ultimately that's really the goal of what business is. Nobody's in there just as a charity, otherwise it's a nonprofit. The goal of business is to make money. But the real purpose of business is to deliver that greater advantage, that greater benefit to somebody, getting them close to the ultimate result that they're after.
So how do you know, Charles, at any point of your life, not just a 4-year-old, that actually what you've done is your best work?
Well, that's a good question. And I just think, well, first of all, the intent was not to create my best work. The intent was to create as much product as fast as possible. And so some of it just looked like scribbles as opposed to artwork. But it was mass production. Put a piece of paper in front of me, grab my crayons, go crazy, throw it in the bag, let's do another one. Grab it, throw it in the bag, do another one. And I had good artwork that I've done in the past that I could compare it to. And the artwork that I was selling, I would not be able to honestly say that I could be proud of it. I was just putting out product to sell. See, I thought the purpose of business was just to make money, and as long as I brought my product to market, that people would pay me for it. It wasn't until Mrs. Hersey gave me that rejection and really that enlightening sort of experience that made me realize, oh, wait a minute here. Nobody told me this. I'm actually supposed to produce something of value here, something that my best work. I didn't know I was supposed to do that.
And have you always, from that moment, from Mrs. Hersey's doorstep, have you consistently overachieved in the value that you try to provide now?
Well, I don't know that the answer as far as have I consistently overachieved, the answer to that really would have to come from my clients and my customers. I know from an emotional standpoint, that really stung when I was 4 years old and she didn't think I produced my best, and it was an embarrassing experience. So I know from that level, from that point on, I always wanted to make sure that I delivered something that I could be proud of. And again, to go back to my dad, later in life, so after 4 years old and when I got a little bit older and I could go to work with my father. Now, I was a little bit older. Maybe I was in 4th grade or so. And my dad had a construction company, so it's not like there was a high level of skilled expertise that was required for every aspect of that job. There were certain things that I could do, like hand me a shovel and say, clean up this mess or whatever it might be. So I would go to work with my dad, and my dad would constantly remind my brother and I, you're a Gaudet, and so you need to be proud of your name. Everything you do, it must be the best. You need to show up before any of the other employees. You need to leave after all the other employees. And everything you do, you need to make sure that you can be proud that you did it because your name is attached to that work. And so, as you can imagine, I mean, there's probably a lot of parents here that are thinking, oh my God, that's ridiculous. I can't believe somebody was raised in such an intense environment. But there are many, many blessings as a result of that. And the reason of why I'm where I'm at today is a sole result of the lessons that my dad taught me. And I'm extraordinarily grateful for that. And where was I going with this? See, this is the ADD that we're talking about. But
go back to Wales. It's a safe place.
Squirrel. But right. I mean, I don't know where I was going with that, but
no, what I was talking about really, because this is episode 50, and sure. One of the things about Join Up Dots that I wanted to get across to the listeners was on every single person's journey, there's not a plan. Most of it is just kind of you get on and you do things, and one thing is cause and effect, and you make mistakes and you have stumbles and you have successes and you build upon those successes. So one of the things that I wanted to do with this show was make sure that every single thing that I put out was exactly where I was at that time. So if you listen back to episode 0.5, which was just me talking about my dreams and aspirations, compared to episode 50 now, hopefully there's a progression in the quality, and you can actually hear that I've become more competent. I've got more things to say. I can free flow in a more precise way than I could at the beginning. But there's a part of me that would kind of like to go back and erase those early ones, because it's now got my name on it, but that's not really who I am now. So with the content that you're producing, do you kind of think, although you did your best at that time, that when you look back on it, you kind of go, actually, I think that I could have just pushed myself a little bit more and got a little bit more juice out of that, whatever I produced?
Well, I think that even where you're the episode 50, when you get to your episode 100, if I'm a betting man, I'm going to say you're going to look at episode 50 and say, wow, I thought it was so great, but I've learned so much over the course of the next 50 episodes. I really would like to re-record episode 50. Would you agree with that?
No, because I love every single conversation. I do. I love the fact that there is a natural step. You know, it's a step-by-step approach. And it excites me, the fact that if I did erase it, then I wouldn't have anything to jump back on and go, oh, blimey, I have improved.
Gotcha. I guess the correct way of phrasing that would say you would look back at episode 50 and say, wow, you have improved a lot since episode 50 to episode 100.
Yes.
Would that be more accurate?
That would be totally accurate, sir.
And I think that even the stuff that I have accomplished over the course of the last four to 6 months, when I look at where I was 4 to 6 months ago and where I am today, there's just a huge, just massive shift in the amount of experiences and knowledge that I've had just in that short period of time. Never mind a year or 2 or 3. And not everything has been all roses and flowers. I mean, there were times when I had no idea how there could ever be a positive outcome as a result of, let's see, I was in over $1 million in debt, paying double-digit interest rates. I was in a situation where I thought I was going to end up getting divorced. I had admitted myself in the emergency room for stress. I had a doctor telling me that the stress was literally killing me, and that if I didn't change, it would kill me, and I would die as a result of that. I mean, there are so many things. I've been sued by subcontractors who didn't like the fact that I'm a 20-something-year-old guy controlling millions of dollars, and they didn't like the fact that they had an answer to a 20-something-year-old, so they tried to do shoddy business practices to see if I would pick up on it. And when I did, rather than own up to it, they decided to continue their story, and we ended up in court. And so there were so many things that, you know, I look at that and I'm going, man, when you can't sleep at night because the stress is so bad that you have to fall asleep on the couch. And though I wasn't diagnosed as an alcoholic, and it got to a point where I couldn't go through an entire day unless I had something to drink because the stress was so bad, the chest pain was killing me. I mean, I remember sitting at the table with my wife, slamming my hand on the desk, clenching my chest and going, I know life isn't supposed to be like this. I don't understand. I can't go another day living my life like this. I don't know. I can't do it anymore. And if you had told me at that moment, Charlie, let me tell you something. All of this is going to result in a better and brighter future down the road, I probably would have punched you in the face.
But isn't that true? But isn't that true, though, that we learn more from the bad times? And quite often, the guests who have been on the show have said to me, if I look back and I connect my dots, I join up my dots, the biggest dot, the one that I look back on that actually was the most positive, was actually the darkest at the time. It was turmoil. I couldn't see where to go, but I look back on it now and I think, thank God for that moment, because I reevaluated my life. I found structure, whatever, but it pushed me on to a better place. And without that, I wouldn't be where I am today.
Absolutely. In fact, two things that I want to bring up. There's, are you a Rocky fan, Rocky Balboa?
I love Rocky Balboa. I just saw a grudge match the other day. Have you seen Grudge Match?
No, I didn't.
It's not quite Rocky. You can actually understand what he's saying, which is always a plus point. But yeah, you can't beat Rocky, can you?
Well, one of the quotes that was said in the movie that I love is that it's not about getting hit.
It's 6.
About how hard you can get hit and still move forward.
You're the first person to ever quote that to me, Charles. That's one of my quotes.
Really?
That is Rocky 6, Rocky Balboa. He's standing outside with... Sorry, guys, if everyone's sitting out there and they don't even know what Rocky is, then shame on you. But yeah, that is the bit when he's standing outside with his son. And it's true, isn't it? It's not how hard you can hit, it's how hard you can be hit and keep on moving forward. And I think that is one of the most profound quotes. And it's kind of shocking, really, that it's not from Gandhi or someone, that it's Rocky Balboa. But it's amazing.
I'll tell you, so when I had my challenges, eventually, as far as the $1 million in debt and whatnot, I managed to. So I realized I couldn't work any harder than I was working, and that I needed to change the way I was thinking and go from working harder to working smarter. And I created certain strategies that ultimately formed the business that I have now, and the book that I've written, the Predictable Profits Playbook. Part of that is all included in that. But in that recovery from my lowest point, my wife and I invested roughly about $250,000 to travel the world with Tony Robbins. I don't know if you know who Tony Robbins is.
I think everyone knows Tony Robbins.
Sure, one of the world's top peak performance coaches. And so, in one of the conversations that I had with Tony, I'm sharing sort of the trials and the tribulations and whatnot that I have in my life. And so Tony says to me, "So does that sound like a big problem to you?" And I said, "Oh, are you kidding me? A big problem? This thing is huge." And he said, "Wow, that's a big problem, huh?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Let me ask you a question. Who are some of the people in your life that you would like to become, that you look at as role models?" And I said, "Well, one of them is Richard Branson. Richard Branson would be my professional role model. I think you know who he is, right, David?"
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And so I said, Richard Branson's one of my professional role models. And he said, "So let's look at Richard Branson, for example. He wants to be one of the first people to take travel into space for regular people, take travel into space." And he had this huge battle with British Airways, and he's right now managing somewhere around 400 different companies. Let me ask you, do you think that Richard Branson has got a big problem when you're managing, say, 400 different companies? And so I looked at him and I said, "Yeah, I'd say that's a big problem." He said, "Do you think that Richard Branson would look at your problems and see that as a big problem or a tiny little problem?" And I said, "Well, I guess in comparison, he'd look at my problems and look at them as a tiny problem." He said, "Right. I mean, Richard Branson, do you think he'd lose maybe even a minute of sleep dealing with the stuff you're dealing with right now?" And I said, "Probably not. He would even look forward to having my little problems compared to his." And he said, "Right. Big people have big problems. Little people have little problems. What kind of game, what kind of impact do you want to play in this world? Do you want to be a big player? If so, get big problems. Like, even if you don't have a big problem right now, create them. Don't look at problems as a bad thing. Problems are a great thing. Mother Teresa, she had a huge problem. She wanted to end world hunger or something like that, right? It's a huge problem to have. So as long as you want to stay little, then continue with those little problems. You want to play a bigger game, get bigger problems. And that really, it made me look at the challenges in my life completely differently than I was looking at them presently. Because, as you know, there's that mindset of avoiding problems and running away from problems. And what Tony made me aware of is that really that's not what we want to do. Instead, we want to look at these problems and tackle them head on. And then once we get through that problem, look at the world and say, bring it on. I'm ready to take on a bigger one.
That is brilliant advice for everyone out there listening who's thinking of starting a business or starting a blog or creating some kind of income producing stream, because so many people have emailed me and said, it wasn't until these shows were coming out that they realized that it was a bite-sized chunk that they had to do. It wasn't the big picture. It wasn't how to create a company. It was just to look at one issue, solve it, and then move on to the next. And so Tony's advice there, I think actually, if Tony was saying that to me, I think I might resent it first of all, because I kind of think, well, no, actually, my problems are bad problems, and it's all right for you, Tony. But I think I would go away and digest it, and I can totally see what he's saying. But did you feel sort of like a personal attack when he first said it to you, or did you actually go instantly, yes, I can see what you're saying?
When it was framed in the context of comparing my problems with Richard Branson's problems, you could very easily see the difference between my problems and his problems. And one of Tony's points is that you can tell the size of a person by the size of their problems. And it's so true, because when you really think about it, think of the most influential, most powerful people in the world and look at their problems and compare those problems with the people who are maybe not playing as big as they think they could or should be playing. Little people don't have big problems, and big people don't have little problems. You want to play a bigger game, welcome bigger problems.
So where do you consider yourself now, Charles? Because looking at your portfolio of companies and that, and for somebody of your age, I honestly don't think that I could pull it off. I'm just not that kind of person. So do you say that you're a big player, or are you somebody who's getting bigger, or where would you sort of benchmark yourself against those people that, like Richard Branson's, that you aspire to and you look up to?
That's a great question. And I think that if Tony Robbins was standing in my room right now, he would say, Charlie, I want you to come up and tell them you're a big player. Just own it. Tell them you're a big player. But if I'm going to be honest with you in the audience, I would say that I'm getting bigger. So I have a binder that is sitting next to me at all times. And the binder illustrates where I am right now, what are some of the things that I need to accomplish in order to get to where I need to be. So there are certain things that I'm doing that I'm always trying to stretch myself. So I'm not going to take myself from where I am today and all of a sudden create this massive, massive problem and get so far out of my comfort zone that it almost paralyzes me. For some people, that's great. I have friends of mine who have started nonprofit organizations and literally went from day one having not a big problem to making the decision they were going to start this nonprofit organization to end human trafficking, for example, and now all of a sudden his problem is absolutely enormous. And so for me, I've got a giant vision, but the way it works is every day I ask myself, what is one thing that I can do today that's going to push me just a little bit further beyond my comfort zone? And tomorrow, what's one more thing that I can do that's going to push me beyond my comfort zone? And so that's how I handle it. And I'm all driven by this larger vision of who I want to become.
But this is the thing, really, and I'm going to play Steve Jobs' speech in a moment because this really sort of emphasizes the conversation that we're having and the theme of the show. That you've got to have trust in your abilities, haven't you, to be able to overcome those issues and push yourself out of those comfort zones, because so many people are trapped in those comfort zones, even though deep down they want to break free, have a different existence, earn more money, have more free time, blah, blah, blah. It's still having that ability to go, yes, I believe that if I push myself out of my comfort zone, I can actually deal with what comes my way.
It's a combination of being willing to step outside of your comfort zone. And one of the things that I love most about Richard Branson, for example, is if you were to have a conversation with Richard Branson, I imagine it would go somewhere along the lines of, the only reason why Richard Branson is a billionaire and most other people are not is because he was just bold enough to be willing to fail and get knocked down and stand back up and knocked down and stand back up so many times that he's failed more than most other people, which is the difference between why he's a billionaire and most people are not. And it comes down to failure, because he was willing to fail, which is the opposite of the way most people look at success. Most people think that in order to succeed, you need to be driven towards what it is that's going to give you the greatest chances of success, as opposed to putting yourself out there and saying, I am just going to see what I can do. I'm going to be bold. I know this is taking a risk. And if I fail, I'm going to learn from it and I'm going to move forward. I mean, think about it for a second. Richard Branson, if who in their right mind, as a young guy with limited resources, would take on British Airways? Why would you do that? And he has a number of different stories like that. And the one of the things that I admire most about Branson today is the fact that he still admits that even today he's still failing. And he has no problem with that.
And that's the key thing, isn't it, for successful people? You know, I saw something about Michael Jordan the other day, and he was saying, you know, the only reason I'm so successful is that I've failed more times than anybody else I know. And you've got to have those failures, haven't you? You know, I'm on this journey now, and in many ways, it seems like instant success. Now I'm doing this. But I can actually look back to maybe 3 or 4 years of trying different online things, and just you know, working at something really hard, but not just finding that angle that felt naturally comfortable, or it played to my strengths, or whatever. And I look back on it and I think, well, were they failures? Well, yes, I suppose they were. Could I have taken them to success? Ooh, I don't know. Might have been able to, but would I have had the passion to keep on going? No, I haven't. So you do have to try stuff. You do have to, you know, throw it into the mix and see what sticks, and try other things and see what doesn't stick, and just keep on taking action on a daily basis, don't you?
Well, and back onto the Rocky quote that we talked about earlier, if you think about it, by the traditional view of success, that would be getting into the ring with your competitors and avoiding every hit and not getting hit, not getting knocked down. That would be sort of the traditional version of success. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
But when you look at the view of success in the eyes of Richard Branson, you would see that the toughest competitors, the Mike Tysons, the Muhammad Alis, these guys are the guys that they can take punches in the face, and it's because they've taken so many different punches that now you and I could hit any one of those guys as hard as we wanted to, and we're not going to knock them out, because with every punch they've gotten stronger and stronger and stronger. And so this is how they've become world champions.
Why are some people like that? Is it just genetics? I'm fascinated. I was doing a tour through America years ago, and I got hit by this snowstorm, and I ended up in a place called Louisville, and I'd never heard of it. And I went into a bar there, and I said, "Is there anything to do here?" And they said, "Oh, there's the Muhammad Ali Museum down the road." And I didn't know anything about the chap at all, other than who he was, as a boxer. And I went through this place, and I came out the other side being sort of galvanized that it's my future and I need to take control. And it was one of the most powerful places. If anyone's in that area and you think to yourself, what should I do? Go there. It really is fascinating. Even if you don't like boxing, you can just see that this man had to overcome so many obstacles, many of them created by his desire to create bigger problems for himself, as you say, become a bigger person to create bigger problems and all those kind of stuff. But why do you think people like him want to do that? And why do you think, Richard Branson's and the Michael Jordans and yourself, you're overcoming bigger and bigger issues where, quite frankly, you probably, you're quite well off, I imagine, and you could sit there watching The Simpsons on the sofa and having quite a pleasant life. Why do you feel that some people want to drive themselves whilst others don't?
There are two types of people out there. There are the people that let life happen to them, and there are other people that make life happen for them. And so if you're the type of person that lets life happen to you, then you're just living a life in reactionary mode. But if you're the other type of person that understands that you can make life happen for you, then you're in a proactive type of mode. And the more you take that first step and realize, wow, look at this. Not only can I make life happen for me, I can create the life that I want. And then you start really thinking about it and saying, well, if I can create the life that I want, what is the life that I want? And the more you can be clear about the life that you want to create for yourself, suddenly that becomes so exciting and so inspiring and so engaging that you spring out of bed every morning with that special step that bounce in your step. You can't wait to get behind your desk because you've got this huge vision and this huge idea and this life that you want to create that just juices you and excites you, and nothing's going to stop you from doing it. So when you... Sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry. I was so excited by what you were saying. I wanted to jump in, but no, you go with it, Charles.
It's the ADD. Now I've lost it. But that's the difference. So if you're going to make life happen for you, that's the difference. That's the Michael Jordans. That's the Muhammad Alis. That's the Richard Bransons. Love him or hate him, Donald Trump is that way. These are guys that have committed to, I am going to make life happen for me, and nothing is going to stop me. No one, nothing, you name it. I'm going to do it. I mean, if you told Richard Branson when he was a little boy that he would never become a multi-successful entrepreneur, billionaire, somebody that people would eventually want to emulate, I'm sure he would have looked at these people and going, are you insane? Just watch. Pull up a front row seat and watch me do my thing.
It's that amazing thing, isn't it, of finding your thing. When you suddenly find your thing, at whatever age you are in your life, things suddenly seem to be simpler. And I've had this conversation with, probably 48, 49 of the 50 guests, but they've all said to me, I struggled, I couldn't get this going, I couldn't get that going. And then when I found my unique self, my authentic self, when I was playing purely to my strengths, and those are the strengths that I should have known I should have been playing with from the beginning, but for some reason I didn't, then everything just seems to be easier, or not easier, maybe it just runs smoother somehow.
See, and you're right. And I too was in one of those modes where I was always looking for the best thing. I really didn't know what I wanted to do. All I was most interested in was money. And through life's lessons, I learned that money really was merely a byproduct of delivering value. You get compensated in direct proportion to the value you bring out to the world. That in order to bring that value out to the world, I needed to connect myself with my unique abilities. And it's actually, if I was to spend just a little bit of time with you, David, I would be able to tell right off the bat where your unique abilities are and where your interests are. Simple things as I could follow you into your house and go look at your bookshelf. And I would look at the books that you purchase for pleasure. And not because of work where you're forced into buying. I'm saying books that you normally gravitate towards for pleasure, and magazines. And I would start to see a common theme. If you look at my books, the things that I'm buying all the time have to do with marketing and small business growth and achievement. And that's my obsession. That's what I talk about all the time. I love this stuff. For some people, it's leadership. For some people, it might be cooking. For other people, it might be artwork or financial trading, whatever it might be. There's certain something that they're always gravitated to and interested in. When you have time and you're on your iPad or you're on your computer, where are the websites that you naturally gravitate to? See, that's the thing. You're being naturally pulled towards the stuff that you're interested in. So for starters, that's sort of where your interests are, where you're naturally being pulled towards. And as far as your unique abilities, that's one of the activities that I did for fun and for my own enrichment is I went to my clients, I went to my Insiders Club members, and I went to everybody that I could that was involved inside my business. And I said, just out of curiosity, why is it that you decided to do business with me? Now, I'm a marketing guy. I fully expected that I was going to get some people that were going to come back and tell me, well, Charlie, it's obvious. I mean, the reason why I did business with you is because I think you're a kick-ass marketer. And while that obviously has to be a reason why people gave me money, almost everybody, when I say almost everybody, I'm talking 85, 90% at least, if not more, they all had a common theme, which was, Charlie, you know what? You actually make us become better versions of ourselves. I stopped and I thought about it. I go, what? What? I don't understand. Almost nobody brought up the idea of marketing. Is it somehow they've enjoyed working with me because I've helped them go beyond what they originally thought was possible for themselves. And so, I find that more so in my unique ability. Where I can look at a situation and see opportunity differently than maybe other people can.
I think you're right with me, and I am going to play the Steve Jobs speech now because it's the 50th show, and if I don't play it on the 50th show, wow, something's gone wrong. But when I first heard this speech, it really cemented what I've always thought, that there is a path for us out there. And if you do look at my sort of bookshelf and stuff and the posters around me, I'm looking around at there now, I've got statements of people on the top of mountains. Success doesn't come to you, you go to it. All great achievements take time. And they're all kind of positive, not self-help books, but autobiographies about how people have created the life they wanted. And that's one of the reasons why I created this show, because I realized I used to sit in pubs talking to people and they used to say, oh, you should be a life coach. I always feel more pumped up after I spoke to you. And it was just that realization that when that passion burns in me and I start to get a flow going through me, it's quite hard not to be inspired somehow. And I don't mean this arrogantly, but it's hard to be not feel inspired when you're in the room with me and I'm going on all cylinders, and I can actually feel that happening to people where it's like they're actually growing in front of me. So I think you're absolutely right. I do think it's all around us, and the things we're interested in and the things that we spend our time on and the websites and the speeches, and here comes Steve, are the clues to us of our authentic self. And so all the listeners out there, when you go home tonight, look around you and look at the things that you're surrounding yourself with, because there's a clue there to your future, and it's a pretty big clue. This is Steve Jobs.
Of course, it was impossible to connect the dots looking forward when I was in college, but it was very, very clear looking backwards 10 years later. Again, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever, because believing that the dots will connect down the road will give you the confidence to follow your heart, even when it leads you off the well-worn path, and that will make all the difference.
So can that make all the difference if you've already achieved success, Charles? Looking at those words, is it easier to say, yes, he's speaking truth, than somebody who really hasn't taken that first step in their new path?
Without any reservation at all, what he says is the absolute truth. And it's sort of what we've talked about right along this whole conversation. None of us would be where we are today if it wasn't for events and situations that have happened in the past. And one of my mentors, his name is Dr. John DeMartini, brilliant man, one of the smartest men I have ever met on this planet, said that we need to look at wisdom. Wisdom actually is seeing everything from both sides. It's the whole yin yang. There's a positive and negative with everything. And wisdom is seeing the positive and the negative happening at the exact same situation, at the exact same time. So with every event that happens in your life, there's an equal and opposite positive and negative happening at that same time. They call that wisdom. And while you might not be able to see the positive in a disaster or a catastrophe or whatever it might be, Dr. John DeMartini's point is that it's always there, and you need to stop and be grateful for that. If you can get yourself to a point where you say, you know what, this just happened to me. I know this sounds really, really crazy, but I'm going to stop for a moment, and I'm going to be really, really grateful. I'm going to try to get in this place of being grateful that this situation happened, because somehow and somewhere there's an equal and opposite positive that has just transpired in this event. And again, it sounds crazy. It sounds a little hairy-fairy at times, but it's been one of the biggest transformational experiences of my life when I can take ownership and responsibility of every situation and control, and knowing that I can be grateful for it, and there will eventually be a positive outcome. And it's allowed me to approach things unemotionally. It's allowed me to approach things more confidently. So that's sort of my shtick with Mr. how to join up dots.
Yeah. It is such a powerful thing, mindset, isn't it? You know, I'm fortunate that generally I'm always upbeat. You know, if it's raining outside, my wife will go, oh my God, it's raining. And I will go, oh, it's only wet sunshine. What's it going to do to us? You know, and I just generally never get down. And so I don't think anything majorly ever bad happens to me. And it's funny, years ago, I got made redundant in my job, and I'd been working in a career doing really sort of great guns, looking back on it, it wasn't the right career for me. I was purely in it to get that status and get that, financial reward to provide for my family. Funnily enough, I wasn't seeing my family because I was trying to get that financial reward, but that's a different story. And when I got made redundant, I think my mentality shifted. And for a while, nothing went my way. And I used to say, I'm the luckiest person in the world because things, just used to flow my way. And at that point, it didn't. It turned full circle. Now I look back on it, and it was purely because my mindset had changed, and I wasn't able to unwillingly accept the opportunities were around me because I was in a kind of mourning stage. Once I flipped again, and I thought, right, come on, let's get out on it and let's be happy and let's be joyful and whatever, then things started to flow again. So I do think it's mindset. And anyone who's out there, and it's not easy to overcome, if you're in a crappy situation and your girlfriend and your boyfriend or your partner, aren't making you happy and your job's not making you happy, it is difficult. And I'm not belittling it in any shape or form. It's one of the hardest things to go, I'm going to change my life when it's all going around you. But if you can, and if you can start to see that it's down to you and it's inside you to actually create that future and make yourself more positive, then you've got half a chance to actually move forward.
And it's a combination of mindset and action. The Secret, the movie The Secret, that was big about mindset. But nobody's sat there and created a multi-billion-dollar business by meditating with their fingers together and their hands in their lap, chanting Om and thinking about creating $1 billion business. That's sort of what a lot of people got out of the movie The Secret, is that just all I got to focus on is this $1 billion business, and I'm going to do it. It's taking that mindset and mixing that in with action.
Yeah, I love The Secret, I'll be honest. And we keep on kind of touching on the law of attraction, and sometimes I bring it up just because I get the flavour that the person is going to have an opposite of view to it. I don't believe in The Secret at all. As you say, I don't believe that I'm going to be sitting there thinking, okay, all I've got to think of is positive thoughts and a Ferrari with Christy Brinkley is going to turn up on my doorstep. That's never going to happen. But by getting out there into the world and trying things and doing things, it is cause and effect. And something has got to happen. And I'm not saying Ferraris and all £1 million are going to happen, but it's those incremental gains, isn't it? And I think that's what the Secret was saying in a kind of roundabout way. And a lot of people say, it's woo-woo and all that kind of stuff. And I totally accept that point of view if you take that kind of view on it. But by taking action, cause and effect, something's going to happen.
Well, you've said it, cause and effect. Steve Jobs said it with his Join Up Dots speech. Dr. John DeMartini, who I mentioned earlier, said it with every, there's a positive and negative with everything. The Chinese have said it for a long time with their yin yang. So there's always a positive and a negative. There's always a cause and effect. There's always two sides to every equation. And even with success. So with massive success, there's also going to be challenges that are on the opposite side of the spectrum, which is why Tony Robbins said big people have big challenges. So lots of success is present with lots of challenges. Somebody, oftentimes when I share this with people, they said, you know what? I know you say that, but let's say I win the lottery tomorrow and I get $100 million. So I got $100 million in the lottery tomorrow. Where's the challenge in that? And the challenge is now you've got $100 million. You've got to manage that money. You've got security issues. You've got privacy issues. There's going to be emotional issues because if you only have $30,000 in your bank account, now you have $100 million. It's going to be really hard to be able to be okay with that. So there's going to be some emotional issues. You're going to feel the need to give away a lot of it. You're going to have challenges with your friends who only want to be friends with you because of money. So there's going to be challenges. So with every part of your life, with every negative, there's a positive. With every positive, there's a negative. It's just, as DeMartini says, it's coming back to the middle and realizing that you just got to be grateful.
You've got to be grateful, and you've got to join up those dots, haven't you, really?
It is joining up those dots. And, that's sort of Steve Jobs was saying that, where he said, look, I am where I am today after joining up the dots. I could only see it after I looked in the past, but he's grateful for where he is today.
What are you most grateful with, Charles? Well, when we started this conversation, I was thinking, what should I focus in on? Because there's so many areas of success that you've had. And I deliberately didn't, because I didn't just want to get into a kind of step by step through company by company by company. But what's the thing, when you look back on where your life is now, that you actually go, yeah, if this is my mark on the world and I leave this world tomorrow, hopefully that doesn't happen, but if I did, what would you most be proud of?
I have to say my kids. I really would. My children, it's funny because as my kids get older, you start to realize the impact and the influence that you have on your children. And when I can have a conversation with a 4-year-old or a 7-year-old, and we're talking about things, about different aspects of their life that they're gonna impact. I mean, both my 4 and my 7-year-old work on their quote unquote businesses every single day, from the moment they wake up in the morning to the moment they go to bed at night. And we'll be sitting on the deck and we'll watch a couple of the private planes flying over. And my son will say, hey, Dad, you know what? I think I'm going to have a private plane one day. I mean, a 7-year-old saying that. My daughter, you're going to think this is crazy, but my 4-year-old daughter and my 7-year-old son were having a fight this morning because they were fighting over the islands that they were going to buy with their own money. They both believe that they are rich. They both believe that they can create the life that they want. They know already. They're at a point in their lives that they don't believe that anything is impossible. They believe everything is possible for them. They also believe that everything is possible with them. It's just sometimes they need a little bit of help. Sometimes they need to work a little bit harder. But everything is possible for them. That's amazing to me. I'm walking with my son home from school, and he says to me, hey, Dad, I'm just curious. I said, yeah, what's this? And he said, so I'm thinking I want to be a billionaire. And I just want to know, do I need to get good grades in school to become a billionaire? This is a 7-year-old. Can you imagine that? I mean, to be 4 years old and 7 years old, and to think that they can do anything and everything they want. Both my son and my daughter have told me that on Sunday, they're going to do a lemonade stand.
Keep them away from Mrs. Hersey if she's around.
Oh, no, well, he you would think, actually, it would be great if, for them to get those challenges, but my son, he goes to the store with his own money. He buys the highest quality lemonade. He comes up with all these crazy ideas. Dad, I think I want to try selling this. If it works, great. If he doesn't, well, then he learns that he's not going to do it next time.
I can see the pride coming out of you. And just before I put you on the mic, which is the end of the show, the sermon on the mic, and we send you back in time to have a one-on-one with your younger self, when you're with your kids, do you hear your dad coming out of your mouth?
I knew you were going to say that. And in many ways, I think yes. The difference between the way I was raised from my dad and the way that I'm raising my kids, there's not a right way, there's not a wrong way, it's only a different way. Is with my dad, it was all about working hard. It's about creating the life that you want. To get there, you have to work hard. And with my children, it is create the life that you want. You're in control of your life, but you need to work smart.
I think that's...
And so that's the difference between when most of my challenges was a result of thinking that I had to work harder than everybody else. I mean, I literally set my alarm for 3:30 in the morning every morning so that I wouldn't, quote unquote, oversleep. This is when I got a little older. And I worked every waking hour of every waking day. Even holidays. I mean, Christmas Eve, I can remember working late one evening. Versus with my children, it's not about working hard, though that is part of the equation. Obviously, you obviously have to work hard, but the focus needs to be on working smart.
Perfect. I hope people are listening to that out there. And I hope somebody's going to listen to the words of wisdom that's going to come out of your mouth now, because this is the part of the show when I send you back in time like Marty McFly, and you have a one-on-one with your younger self, and you can choose any age of younger self that you would like to. And if you could go back in and sit next to the young Charles, what would you say? So this is the Sermon on the Mic, and when the music finishes, you're on the Sermon on the Mic.
Here we go with the best bit of the show, the Sermon on the Mic, the Sermon on the Mic.
So I don't know exactly where to begin here. There's a lot of life's lessons that we can focus on, but the one that immediately comes to mind is a lesson that I learned from one of my many mentors. His name is Keith Cunningham. And throughout my life, there was this chase of always trying to do the best thing and the best thing and the best thing, or whatever that might be. And I would jump from maybe one marketing strategy to another, or one shiny penny to another, or one business idea to another, whatever it was, without actually sticking to one thing and seeing it through. And Keith Cunningham created this brilliant analogy, metaphor, if you want to call it that, where he said life is much like a cafeteria line. And like most of us, we've got to start at the back of the cafeteria line, and you walk all the way down the line until you get to the area where all the food is, and you get your tray, and then you go all the way down the line, you get more food and get more food until the very end where you get to the cash register. But what happens with most people is they get into one line and they're waiting to get their food. And they're looking over their shoulder to the left of them. They're looking over the shoulder to the right of them. And they're realizing, or at least they're seeing the perception, that other lines are moving faster than the line that they're in. And so they get out of that cafeteria line and they go into another cafeteria line. And the same thing repeats itself. They're now in a new line. They're looking to their left. They're looking to their right. The line's not moving fast enough, so they jump into another line. And they jump into another line. And they jump into the other line. They're realizing that if they just stayed in that one cafeteria line, and they just committed to seeing it all the way through, that they would get to the food and they would get to the cash register a lot faster than they ever would before. So my big moment of wisdom is to commit to something, whatever that might be. Something where you've decided that that is how you're going to create your life, to making life happen for you. That big vision, that big picture, create that. Then get into that line, that cafeteria line, and stay in that line, and don't get out of that line until you've seen it all the way through.
I love that, Charles. I absolutely love that, and I hope the young Charles loved it as well. Just before we let you go at the end of the show, how can people connect with you?
Well, they can find me on my website. It's predictableprofits.com. And they could also learn more about the way that I think in my methodologies, in my book, The Predictable Profits Playbook, The Entrepreneur's Guide to Dominating Any Market and Staying on Top. And they can find that on Amazon.
You were absolutely the perfect guest for episode 50. You've been amazing. And other than not trying a Rocky impression, which I thought you were going to go for at one stage in that, you have over-delivered in the content. You've been so open, generous, and, of course, talkative. And you really have been the star guest that I wanted for this personal milestone in my personal cafeteria queue that I'm in at the moment. But as I say to all the guests, Charles, if you've got things that you want to share in the future and you've got more dots to join up, please come back, because I believe that by joining up our dots and connecting our pasts, we have the best opportunities to build our futures. Charles Gaudet, thank you so much.
And thank you.
David doesn't want you to become a faded version of the brilliant self you were once to become. So he's put together an amazing guide for you called the 8 Pieces of Advice That Every Successful Entrepreneur Practices, including the 2 that changed his life. Head over to joinupdots.com to download this amazing guide for free, and we'll see you tomorrow on Join Up Dots.